the infrastructure in Greenland? You know, the infrastructure between cities.
Yes.
Do you ever think it's going to all be connected, or
It's has been changed very much. When I was a kid, the town where my parents lived was closed from about the 1st of December until the 1st of May. No ships, no connection, only a telegraph that was very expensive. No telephones. And that was for all the cities in the northern Greenland. Southern Greenland, there is not so much ice. Now they have airplanes coming to every one of these. The bigger towns, they have an airfield with a fixed-wing airplane. To the smaller settlements, and helicopter comes once, twice a week. They have a very good connection all year round. They have made a special, but it's a special link of radio link going from a small village up to the top of a mountain, and then down on the other side to another village, and so all along the coast of Greenland. This was built in the late 60s, 1960s, and at that time it was trying to bring telephone and television to all these places in Greenland. But now they have, not only that, they have internet, they have connection. It is not as good as the internet here, because there's a limit of how much, especially a limit coming from, but they had fiber, glass fiber, from United States to Greenland and to Europe. So they are connected now. They have electricity everywhere, but they don't have roads from one part to another. It's impossible. It's a coast with very steep mountains, with glaciers coming from the inland ice out into the sea, and fjords going. So it's the only way of transporting, or the only way, there's two ways of going. You can go by boat or you can go by plane. And it's very expensive. That's the bad thing about it. So many people, when they want to visit their family in another town, they take a small open boat and put a 50 horsepower motor on it, and then they go, and very much close. It's very hard to go from one place to another. But there's also small motorboats. They are interacting very much now. You can go around. You can telephone with your pocket telephone to Greenland, to everyone up there, and it's a modern society, Greenland. It's much more modern than in Canada. Greenland has everything, but it is very expensive. Greenland has the same standard of living as Denmark, but it costs much. And the only way it can be running like this is that Denmark sends a lot of money to the Greenland government, and they can use most things. There's private today. There's private firms and stores and everything in Greenland, but most of the activity there is done by the government. And they have taken over from old times when it was a Danish government that was doing everything. The big trawlers are owned by the government in Greenland. The shops are not, but the buildings, many buildings are owned by the government, and it's much government driven. The history is that Norway and Denmark was one country for 500 years of war, and Copenhagen was the main city. That's where the king lived. But the king, and Iceland and the Faroe Isles and Greenland was part of the Norwegian country. During the Napoleon Wars, Denmark lost way to England and especially to Sweden. And in 1814, there was peace in Kiel, a German city just south of Denmark. And Norway, it was the English people who had won this war against Napoleon. And Denmark, who had been with the Napoleon, they had Norway was given to Sweden from Denmark after more than 500 years. It was quite a job. But there's some problems about Iceland, Faroe Isles and Greenland, because nobody had thought about it. But there's a historian in Denmark who has studied this, and he believes that it was the English who didn't want the Swedish to have Greenland, Faroe Isles and Greenland. And he could have taken it. England might have taken it, but they wouldn't. They thought that Denmark should keep it because Denmark was a very, very small country at that time. Everything was taken away. So they belonged to Denmark. And Denmark kept on trade with these three countries. And they sent up the Danish ministers and Danish trade people who bought the wool from Faroe Isles and wool and fish from Iceland. And they had government-owned shops where the Icelanders and the Faroe Isles people could come and trade their things, buy clothes and coffee and things like that. And the same with Greenland. And that has been going on for a long time. Then Iceland, they wanted to be themselves. And in 1944, they became an independent country. 20 years before, they had the same king as Denmark. But it was, and they have had a good time after this. It's one of the rich countries in the world. They are very special. But there are 300,000 people, and they can get along. The Faroe Isles want also to be independent, but there are only 50,000 people. And it's not enough, especially if you're living on fishing. Fishing is good in some years and gives a lot of money, and then suddenly it stops, and you have to have something else. And the same with Greenland. They were living on seals, and then the seals disappeared. Maybe because they were hunted in Canada, maybe because of the water getting a little warmer. And instead of seals, codfish came to Greenland. And there were so many codfish in Greenland. And everybody was fishing this, except Danes and Greenlanders. But if you go in seals, you can get everything. You get skin for clothing. You get all the food. They were not eating only the mussels. They were also eating everything inside. And you get fat for your lambs. You get bone for your hunting weapons. So you can live on seals alone. Fish, you have to catch a lot of fish and then sell it. In Europe, especially southern Europe, where they are Catholic. And then you have to import clothes and all the other things. And Greenland wasn't fit for that. And that was in the 1930s and in the 40s and in part of the 50s. They lost the seals and they hadn't made an industry for the fishing. But then this new development of Greenland started, especially because the Americans had shown that you could build modern cities in Greenland. There were no limits there. Secondly, having colonies wasn't very popular at that time. English had to get rid of all their colonies, and Denmark was to do something. So in 1951, Greenland became a part of Denmark, and everything was going to be equal. One result of the missing seals and the codfish that nobody really fished was that the people were becoming very poor. They were underfed. They got sick, especially tuberculosis was very common in Greenland. In the 1950s, I was soldier, as I told you, on the American base, and in 1954, the ships would be coming from Greenland, bringing sick people to this air force base, and they would hire an airplane to come to Greenland and bring the people to Denmark. And then they went on hospitals in Denmark, specially made for tuberculosis. And there were many. I was in this base for 6 months, and I remember it was not once, it was maybe 5 times or more that this transportation of sick people from Greenland to Denmark was. And that is one of the things that have bin changed after all this new building of hospitals. The first really big building in Greenland was a hospital in Nuuk. It's still there. They made a small ship that could sail into every small village with doctors, and they had Röntgen.
X-ray.
X-ray, yeah, X-ray system. So they could test everyone and find the sick people and give them the chance to come to Denmark. But what really matters is that you have all the food you want to eat. It is, you have to have a higher living standard. I was in Greenland, as I told you, very much in the 40s and 50s. But in 1969, I became a professor in Denmark, and I was in Denmark for 35 years. And then I came back to Greenland in 1996, as I told you. And one of of course, there was airplanes and helicopters and everything. But one thing, when I was going there as a young man, everybody else was only this height compared with me. And when I came, these 35 years later, the people was just as high as I was. It was really something has happened in those years. And today, when I am teaching in Greenland, the students are just as big and healthy as the Danish students. There's no difference there at all. So it was really needed to have this development. But it has been very, very difficult for the people living there. But in one generation, they went from hunters to modern civilization. And the Danes came up there and they made everything. They were not only drawing the buildings, they were building the buildings, they were running the whole thing. And the Greenlanders, they had no education, they were just standing looking at that. And that's not a healthy system. If it's the real thing, it should have been that what Denmark should have started 50 years before, and then training people to become carpenters and engineers and all this, but there was no time for that. And especially because of all the sickness, it was important that the change came very quickly. And now it's a very modern city. Everything functions as it does in Denmark. Of course, there's difference. The weather is very different. The ice is very different. You are much more dependent upon the nature than you are in Denmark. And you have these small settlements still. You have villages with 50 people, 60 people, and there is maybe 50 miles or 100 kilometers to the next village. So you live in small, isolated places. But now you have the radio, you have the television, you have the phone, as long as you are in the village. When I was a child, there was about 300 Danish people in Greenland and 25,000 Greenlanders. The language in Greenland was the original Greenland language. The Danes who went to Greenland went up there for a lifetime. My father came there when he was 21, and he stayed there the whole working life and went to Denmark when he got his old age pension. And it was the same for the doctors, for this was the tradesmen and the ministers who had a Danish education. They were taught Greenland. If you were going to Greenland as a minister, you had to have a course in the Greenland language for a year in Denmark before you went to Greenland. Greenlandish language was spoken everywhere except inside the Danish house. When you went into your wife, you changed to Danish. But the kids spoke Greenlandic language outside. My father spoke in his work with the hunters or in the shop, Greenland language. This was until the new development in Greenland. Then suddenly the Danes came to Greenland for 1 year or for 2 years. I think the average is 1.5 years. They come to Greenland to have a new experience, and they don't have time or interest, or there is no courses for them. In old time, it was, what do you call it?
Mandatory.
Mandatory, yes, but not then. But because Denmark has a small language, that's our own, the Danish government tried to build up the Greenland language by teaching Greenland language in the schools first. Then there was a German minister who was born in Greenland who made the spelling of the Greenland language with normal Roman letters. He did this, I think, 1850s or so. It's quite a job for one man to do this. But so they had a spelling of the language. And this was, of course, used in the churches, but it was also used in the schools. And stories were written in Greenland language. And there's a paper, I think now it comes twice a week, but then it came once a week, that was printed in Greenland language. And there were books written in Greenland language, and they had a printing facility in Greenland. And this was all happened in the 1850s until 1900. All this was built up. In modern times, there's a radio in Greenland, and in Greenland language, some in Danish, and now they have television. And the Greenland language is very strong in Greenland, compared especially with Canada or Alaska, where it's English everywhere. English is taught in schools. It was so that the kids couldn't talk with their grandparents because the grandparents were speaking the old Inuit language, and the children were only speaking English. But in Greenland, you have this Inuit language. It's related very much to the Canadian and the Alaskan, but there is quite a lot of difference. It's difficult for people from Greenland to understand and speak the language in Canada. I heard a man who has been working in Greenland, and especially with the Greenland language, and he said that the Greenland language is blooming right now. It's very strong, but in the homes, when you're talking to your kids or your wife and your family, it's Greenland language. But if you go outside the house and you go to a working place, there's so many Danish carpenters and engineers who don't speak English, or a Greenland language, because they have only been in Greenland a few years. And so there's very much Danish language. There's even people, Danish people, who are married to a Greenland girl, and they speak Danish all the time. They have two languages. I know the young people in Nuuk, they have made their own mix between Danish and Greenland language. You have the same here in Denmark, from Danish to English. It's difficult for old people in Denmark to understand what the young people are talking, because a lot of English words come into the language. So if you would compare something, I would say Denmark, you have also a lot of places, universities speak English, a lot of the international firms in Denmark, you speak English. So we are going in the same way as in Greenland, but the Greenlanders, they are in front of us right now with the language. But there's only one problem. There's great difference between the Greenland language and the Danish language. But English and Danish is there's not that big difference. It's quite easy for a Dane to learn English. It's the opposite way. It's not so easy. But I heard that 800 words came from Denmark to England in around year 1000, because of all the Vikings who were kings in Denmark. And some of these words were lost in Denmark and are now returning because of the opposite way. So, and Greenland language is very different. It's not a Roman language, it's not a European language at all. And it is difficult to learn it. And nobody is, you can't take a course in Greenland. It should be mandatory, really, but they don't do it. So there is a difference along, and then there's also customs. At one period, it's smart for all the young people to speak Danish. If you go to one of the high schools there and listen in the canteen where they're eating, you would hear them speak Danish. And then some years later, the world has changed, then it's Greenland language. At the moment, right now, it's Greenland language. That's a smart thing. You can also see it on the names. In the period, all the kids will have Danish names. And when I was a child, it was especially names from the Bible that was used. And now suddenly it's Greenlandic languages. Yeah. In politics, it's difficult. It's like the European Union. You have to translate everything. And translating, and there's some, especially young Greenlanders who went to Denmark for school and then took the university and have all the degrees and the abilities that's very needed in Greenland. They have lost their language. It's very easy to lose a language where nobody is speaking it. You can't hear it on the radio. You can't see it everywhere, anywhere. And they come back to Greenland, and they don't like it up there, but they can't speak Greenlandish. There's some of the political people who only speak English. So it's very mixed. But the Greenland language is surviving, I would say. It's not disappearing. It's rather strong, much stronger than in Canada and Alaska.
Yeah, it will probably die there, isn't it?
It is. And they have another problem. They don't have letters. They have some symbols, and it's nothing. This having the Greenland language, but there's problems with the Greenland language in writing because the words are so long that you can't just, all our words are so small that you can read them just as the Chinese read a sign, but you can't do that in Greenland. It's difficult thing. I know some people who speak Greenlandish and Danish fluently, both of them. And the paper, this paper that was started in 1984, it has a page in Greenlandish and then one in English. And I talked to these, which do you read? The Danish, they said, it's much easier. So it's getting along, it's functioning. Not really. Young people came to Denmark from Greenland and took an education of different kinds. And they were living, there's a Greenland home specially made for these. There's one in Copenhagen, and there's also in Aarhus and Aalborg, I think, for young Greenlanders that are studying in Denmark. And everybody, you could be a midwife, and you could be a combination of a minister or preacher and a school teacher in Greenland. But the rest, if you want to be a nurse or you wanted to be a carpenter or anything of that, you had to go to Denmark. It was not only the academic, it was also the craftsmanship you had to do in Denmark. So they came to Denmark and were in Denmark 3, 4, 5 years maybe, and then they went back to Greenland.
And this is where, when I read about history, it gets confusing. Were the Greenlandic people forced to leave Greenland to take an education to be back, or was it volunteer?
No, it was volunteers. Nobody was forced, really. But it was difficult because you couldn't, if you come to Denmark, you had to know some of the Danish language. Some didn't know anything, but they were not forced. It was normally free. It was also mostly the higher levels in Greenland, where the father had a job in the government as a teacher, as a tradesman, as a doctor even. And they went to Greenland. And I went to Denmark and got an education. That's the normal. It wasn't nice as a child. It could be quite hard. But if you go to Greenland today and find the people who are sitting on top of the schools and everything, the political people, they have all been in Denmark when they were children. Some for 1 year, some for 4 years, 5 years. Some also for 3 months. There's a lot of exchange between Danish schools and Greenland schools. And I have talked to many. Some come to a town in Denmark and live in a family, and he's the only one from Greenland on the school. And that can be quite hard to learn the language and be respected by the other children, and so. But mostly they make it.
So basically, today, you're born in Greenland. You can study there until high school, or
Yes, high school. Yes, studentereksamen in Danish. Yes,
yeah.
you can get, and there's quite a lot. I think there are 4 schools at least in Greenland. Normally, if you live in these big towns, it's okay, but a lot of them come from different places, so they are in a kind of boarding school, and they're made special homes for these students. And it's quite a lot of the young people get this examination, but then it stops. Going to Denmark to get a higher education, it's very few. Until now.
Until now. And then when people from Greenland come to Denmark, they get a higher education. Do they stay or do they go back?
No, a lot of them stay here in Denmark. We were talking about Greenland has these 55,000 people. 10,000 of the people there, or maybe 8, I don't know the exact number, but something like that, are Danes in Greenland for a limited time. If you come to Denmark, you find even more Greenlanders living in Denmark. Some are living here because they're taking an education, but others are living here permanently. I know some marriages where it's a Greenlander and a Dane, and then they take maybe 3 years in Greenland, and then they go to Denmark and live 3 years in Denmark. And some of their kids are born in Greenland, and some are born in Denmark. And those born in Denmark start out speaking Danish, go to Danish schools, and they come back to Greenland, and they live the rest of their lives in Greenland without speaking Greenlandish. I knew of a woman there, and she had a son who was 5 years old, and he was going to start in school, and she would, in Greenland, and she would follow him and try to learn the language, Greenland language, along with her 5-year-old son.